It's Happy Birthday, WBTV. Celebrate the past 40 years, next on Top.
Medical reporter Sonia Gant, on your side.
For 40 years, WBTV has broadcast throughout the Carolinas. Today, Top of the Day journeys back to the very beginning.
In a few moments, a memorable event in the advancement of television in this area will occur.
We'll pay tribute to the special people, places, and events that made it all possible, and take a look at what's in store for the future. Join us as we celebrate 4 decades of broadcasting excellence. Today on Top of the Day.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our show on this historic occasion, 40 years of great days here at WBTV on this July 14th, 1989. I'm C.J. Underwood.
And I'm Barbara McKay. Good morning. We are usually not seen in this room. This is known as the control room at WBTV, and surrounded we are by the people who do just that. They control us. Our producer, our director, all kinds of talented people that make sure that we are seen by you each day.
And incidentally, you have to treat these people nice.
Yes.
Patsy here will cut you off if you don't
That's
do
right.
well. And our director here can play funny tricks on you sometimes, as a matter of fact.
And what, just like that. Now, John, behave yourself. We don't want people to have to look at us turned upside down, standing on their heads.
Upside down cake. Maybe you can make one of those sometimes.
We are going to have cake today, by the way.
Yeah, and we're going to meet a lot of pioneers, a lot of great people who made this station possible for the last 40 years.
Might be a good day to tape the show if you've been a friend to WBTV for a long time.
All righty, we're here to stand by here. It's time for Lori Thomas and the news.
Hello, everyone. Yesterday it was called unbelievable. Today it's become bizarre. It's the story of that pilot who survived an unconscious 5-hour flight and crashed into the ocean.
WBTV's broadcasting pioneers take us back to the beginning. Next.
Well, hi there. I'm Lynn Bradley Love, and I'm standing right now in our newsroom. It's one of the most modern and technologically complete newsrooms in the country. With the advent of computers and videotape, when news breaks, we can literally get it on the air to you and have you informed in just a matter of minutes. We send out a lot of it through this room. This is Electronic News Gathering, or ENG, and this is our engineer, Roger Hovis. Roger, would you put that tape in and cue it up for me, please? Thank you. Now, this is kind of an example of how we get the tapes on the air to you. Chuck Johnston, our assistant producer, and myself have put together a story that shows you how different things are today than the way that they used to be. It's kind of a resume of the changes that have occurred over the various years. You see our tape is cued there. I'm going to ask Roger to roll the tape, and you'll watch it right now. Roll that sucker, Raj. July 14th, 1949 started out as a sleepy day in Charlotte, North Carolina. Anticipated 88-degree temperatures and a trade show at the Armory Auditorium were about the only news of the day, until the clock struck 12 noon. Then the world as North Carolina knew it changed forever.
With the pushing of this button, direct television is brought to Charlotte and the Carolinas.
Good afternoon. This is Jim Patterson welcoming you to Channel 3 Television from WBTV, Charlotte, North Carolina.
My first memory is of walking out onto Trade Street, coming out of an alley behind what was then the Liberty Life buildings, now the Southeastern building, and across the street there was a furniture store, and I'm not sure what store it was, and there was a mob standing out there in the street, and I walked over there and they were all staring at test pattern on some television sets in the window.
The impact on the community was tremendous. We had most of us had seen television in other cities, but to get it here in Charlotte and to see things on that little 6x6 rectangle of light in the living room was spectacular.
Norman Pravat and Lunas McGlowan were part of the new generation that pioneered this new medium. As WBTV's first producer-director, Norman oversaw live programming in studio and on location.
Sometimes you did have feelings about doing things that were historical, especially in special programming, you know, when the president would come through town, when Eisenhower was here, for instance, and we set up a remote broadcast from Freedom Park, and it was a very big undertaking for us. And we televised that same year, we televised a state Republican convention from what's now the Grady Cole Center.
The creativity was explosive. It was a brand new toy.
Lunas McGlowan came to WBTV to do Nocturne, a live bi-weekly jazz program. He fondly remembers the joys and the problems of those early days.
Well, we didn't have a chance to do anything over again because everything was live. For example, there was a night that Julian Massey, who was floor manager then, signaled a personality who was doing an automobile commercial. And it was one of those read my lips things. He got his attention and said, "Your fly is open. Your fly is open." And the guy didn't have a chance to look down and see, so he did the commercial walking sideways and holding the coat together. But what else can you do?
As television's technology became more sophisticated, Carolinians grew to depend upon WBTV and counted its programs and personalities as old friends. Specials, dramas, and musical programs magically flew through the air and into the homes of Western North Carolina. News was limited to small amounts of the movie-tone news until Nelson Benton was hired as a local reporter.
Nelson would come in sometimes and say, "Norm, I have the greatest city council story you've ever seen." I say, "Nelson, how long is it?" He'd say, "I don't know, 5, 6, maybe 7 minutes." And I remember distinctly saying things like, "Nelson, there's no city council story worth 7 minutes in a 15-minute newscast. You got 3.
Television was bringing not only city council meetings into Carolina homes, but also a view of life in other places. Now you could visit with folks like Burns and Allen.
I forgot to mail their invitations.
Howdy Doody. And I Love Lucy. Then black and white gave way to color. WBTV's staff now understood television. Color gave them another new toy with which to pioneer Carolina TV.
We were first with color, and we were very proud that we were considered the best station in the Southeast.
Yet they were never too good to have fun. Practical jokes were also a high priority. One day, Lunas McGlowan thought he'd see just how professional Pat Lee could be.
She was doing a commentary for a fashion show, and I had persuaded one of the models, who was also a fine dancer, to do a trick just to see if Pat would keep her composure and not break. And so the bit ran like this. The model came down a staircase in a dress and on cue tripped and rolled down the steps, and also at the same time grabbed for a column, one of those fake plastic Roman columns which had a vase of flowers. And although they were plastic flowers, I had put some water in the vase, and it was a big urn. And she also knocked the urn of flowers over on Pat, and Pat never broke.
Today, tomorrow, and for the next 40 years, everything you see on WBTV carries the mark of those who years ago took a chance on the strange new thing called television. But to all, we owe our gratitude for what WBTV is and for what it is yet to be. As you can see, a lot has changed in those 40 years. Just as an example of how much has changed, there's a reel of film like I'm holding right now, is what Jim Patterson originally had to take out to our satellite, or rather our tower, in order to sign us on the air. Today we use little videotapes, beta tapes like this, so there's been a big, big change. We're going to kind of delve back more into the years that were when C.J. Underwood and Charles Crutchfield talk with you coming up next, so stay with us as Top of the Day remembers.
My family means more to me than anything else in the world. So I like to think that I have a little better feel for the kind of stories that people want to see. Basically, I am the kind of person that I'm doing stories about. I have a home, I have a family, I have a job. I know what it is to feel the pressure of a babysitter who's waiting for you to get home while you're trying to finish up that last little thing at work. This gives me a chance to do what I want to do more than anything else, report on your family.
Folks, Folks, this is a Broadcast Pioneers Award presented to the station for distinguished contributions to the art of broadcasting, recognition of dedicated adherence to quality, integrity, and responsibility in programming and management. I think you could probably put that, all those terms associated with one man you're about to meet. We have a little videotape to show him a long time ago, around July of 1949. There he is with some distinguished citizens in Charlotte at that time, celebrating WBTV, going on the air. And he is none other than Charles Crutchfield, better known to his friends as Crutch. And here he is live with us in our lobby. You know, I don't think a lot of people probably realize that your career started just down the road in, what, Greenville, Spartanburg area?
Spartanburg, yeah.
And what year was that? Do you care to admit?
I started in 1929 in radio.
Goodness.
That's been a long time ago.
It's been a little while. But came to BT in what year?
33.
For how much money? Would you share that?
Yeah, it was $20 a week, and I was married at that time, by the way.
All right. Well, of course, $20 went a little ways at that time.
Well, yeah,
I
you
guess.
could buy something with it.
What was your job at that time?
I was an announcer.
An announcer.
And I became program director in about 2 years.
You know, in talking to you in these few minutes, I realized you could still do station breaks for us. Would you consider that?
What do you pay? Do you pay $20 a week?
We've gone up a bit, but so have expenses. What was the first really significant job that you recall having and enjoying in those years?
Well, I think the thing that gave me the most satisfaction was our Right Hanoi program during the Vietnam War. This was done in cooperation with Mr. Perot, Ross Perot from Texas. He was very much interested, and I called him and asked him if we couldn't cooperate on the television, and we did. And we raised 150,000 letters to get release of the prisoners. And Tom Cookerly, who was manager of the station, and 2 or 3 of his people flew those letters to Paris and dumped them over the wall where they were negotiating the so-called release of the prisoners.
Incredible. Now, that says to me something about the philosophy that you always had through the years as president of Jefferson Pilot Broadcasting. How would you describe how you felt the role of a broadcaster in his community?
Well, I think my role was to hire competent people who were highly qualified, and then sort of let them run their own thing or do their own thing. We felt very strongly all along that public service was more than lip service, that we had to do something, we had to put something into the community before we would get anything out of it.
Well, you know, I have a chronology here of events in your life. 1936, announcing the first Junior American Legion baseball game, the Roosevelt Rally. Tell us about the Roosevelt Rally here in Charlotte.
Roosevelt was coming to the Green Pastures Rally down in Memorial Stadium, the old stadium, and he was an hour late getting there. They were driving him in from Asheville, I believe, and it was raining. And so I had to ad-lib for 55 minutes, and this was on the coast-to-coast network. It just frightened me to death.
You didn't expect to have to do that?
No, but it was a great occasion. I'll never forget the president. He got up there, and just as he got to the podium, he was crippled. And they were holding him. His son was holding him up. Just as he got there, a rainbow came across the stadium, and he said, "There's a rainbow in the sky," and thousands of people were sure he put it there.
Boy, what a moment for sure. You know, you even broadcast a slave wedding in Pineville. Why such an event?
Well, it was something different, and nobody had ever done it. And I saw in the Sunday paper that 2 slaves were getting married. They were up in their 90s, both of them. So I called Ralph Painter, who was the only engineer around that day, and we went down and got some wire from Duke Power Company. Yes. It was on a party line down here near Pineville, and we broadcast the slave wedding. And I climbed in the back seat with the couple, the bridal couple, as they were getting ready to leave, and I asked the old man what his plans were. He said, "Son, I think I'll settle down and raise a big family to take care of me in my old age."
Oh, boy.
And this hit the wires coast to coast.
Oh, my. Well, you've been associated with so many incredible events, but as your time during the leadership time here, you brought in Clyde McLean, Jim Patterson, Betty Feeser. Looking back over those, the quality people, you either had some great intuition or just got lucky.
I was lucky. And also, it seemed that everybody wanted to associate with WBT for some reason.
Sure.
And we got people like Alan Newcomb, Wally Jorgensen. We got him from WCCO, Jim Babb. He was selling pots and pans for some company.
Doing pretty good now in your place.
We got some great people. Jim's doing pretty well, yeah.
May I say, this gentleman, of course, spent 44 years here, and it is truly an honor to have been even allowed to follow through these halls where you have been.
Honor to be here.
Thank you, Mr.
Congratulations
Crutchfield.
on your anniversary.
Thank you. Charles Crutchfield, and I'll tell you, a quality individual responsible for the institution where we stand. We'll be back.
Barbara salutes WBTV's legendary Betty Feezer with a famous Feezer recipe. Next.
It's no secret that the most popular woman in the history of WBTV was Betty Feezer. This wonderful lady spent 25 years sharing good information with you. Her program was the most popular women's show in America, and it is an honor for me to stand in her kitchen each day in the Betty Feezer studio. So today, we thought it would be appropriate if I shared with you one of her favorite recipes from one of her books. I get to visit with her very special husband and children here in Charlotte, and they shared with me her books. Her books, by the way, are still available here in the Charlotte area, probably in your area too. According to Betty, the most popular recipes that she did were cakes. So today, in honor of Betty, old-fashioned caramel cake, and you see that I had to have just a little bit of that. Actually, I had to have a lot of that. It is scrumptious, and this is what you do to make it. First of all, you're going to cream 1 stick of margarine or butter along with 1½ cups of sugar. So I have these 2 ingredients, which I've already done that to in my mixing bowl. Again, 1 stick of butter or margarine and 1½ cups of sugar. After you have creamed that, then you're going to add to that, one at a time, 2 eggs. You put 1 egg in and let it beat about a minute, then you're going to put the next one in. At this point in making cakes, in making light and tender cakes, you really can't overbeat it. You want to keep beating it until it's nice and fluffy and smooth. It's when you begin adding the dry ingredients that the overbeating can take place. So at this point, really let it beat and whip, and then when you put the dry ingredients, move very quickly. The dry ingredients are 2 cups of flour, and I'm using cake flour because I think that cake flour is better for cakes. It's nice and tender and light. I'm going to alternately add that cake flour with 1 cup of either buttermilk or regular milk. The recipe calls for buttermilk, but you're also going to add to this a tablespoon of vinegar, and when you add the vinegar to any kind of milk, it's going to make it like buttermilk or sour milk. So if you don't have buttermilk on hand, the vinegar will sour the milk for you anyway. And you're also going to add to this about a teaspoon of baking soda. Anytime you're using sour milk or buttermilk, you're going to use baking soda. Now again, what you will do at this point is turn the mixer back on, and as quickly as possible, add your dry ingredients alternately with the liquid that goes into the cake. Now this will make 2 8-inch layer cakes. You're going to bake them at 350 for about 25 minutes. 350 for 25 minutes, and then they're ready to come out of the oven. Of course, you need to check it and make sure that they are done, and you need to let them cool. After they have cooled, you are going to put this luscious caramel frosting on it. Now, I'm going to confess that I doubled the amount of caramel frosting because I really like it. You don't have to do that, but it will be a thicker frosting layer on it if you do double it. But the original recipe begins with 1 stick of margarine. I'm going to cut this off now so you can hear me better. Remember, 350 for 25 minutes in 2 8-inch layer cake pans. Let them cool. It's important that they cool. The frosting is made with 1 stick of butter or margarine along with 1 box, of course you take it out of the box, of brown sugar, light brown sugar. You're going to put that in with your butter or margarine, 1 stick of that. And then you're going to add 1/2 cup of evaporated milk. You can use cream if you want, but evaporated milk is what the recipe calls for. You let that cook for about 6 or 7 minutes, and I suggest that you stir that as it's cooking. Just let it bubble for about 6 or 7 minutes. Remove it from the heat. Let it cool for about 5 minutes. You're going to then add 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and then you want to beat this with an electric mixer. That works best. You're going to beat it until it's thick enough to spread on your cake. Let's see very quickly the ingredients for this, and I will put it on our recipe sheet in case you didn't get it all down. Believe me, it is worth your time. Old-fashioned caramel cake from Betty Feaser's cookbook. 1 stick of margarine, 1½ cups of sugar, 2 eggs, 2 cups of flour, along with 1 cup of buttermilk, 1 tablespoon of vinegar, 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Then for the frosting, you're going to melt 1 stick of margarine, mix with that 1 box of light brown sugar, 1½ cups of evaporated milk, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and enjoy. Now back to the future. I will see you at Belk this afternoon in Concord, and there's more of Top. Stay with us.
Hugh Harkey and Mike McKay profile some famous faces from Carolina television in the next half of Top of the Day.
Well, we continue Top of the Day now in our videotape room, where the people here have got a lot more brains than I'll ever have.
You know, I like being with you every day, but it's fun to be with people like this. John Jacobs, who is known as resident genius sometimes, always, I guess we should say. Also, videotape engineer, and he makes it possible. Another one of the people who make it possible for you to see what you do each day on Top of the Day. And what are we going to be seeing today?
Okay, we're hearing Roll 10. All right. Hey, coming up, we got more news with Lori, but a lot more history here in our second half.
That's right. Mike will be talking with historian Hugh Harkey about personalities, and then we have Jim Babb coming along, our president, with Lynn Bradley Love. Right now, it's time for news.
Hello again, everyone. Well, yesterday we couldn't believe it. Today it's getting bizarre. It is the story of that pilot who survived an unconscious 5-hour flight and crashed into the ocean.
Yes, CJ, thank you very much. We're down here with Hugh Harkey, who is the delightful historian whom we always enjoy here on Top of the Day. We're going to talk about our WBTV family for a little bit, but let me run these words by you. Any great enterprise is the product of many factors: ideas, capital, facilities, equipment, and people. The most important factor is people. And pictured on the walls here in our Pine Terrace cafeteria at WBTV and Jefferson Pilot Communications are some of the incredible people who have worked here over the years. And Hugh, let's begin. A lot of folks have moved into the area and did not grow up watching WBTV. So for some of them, who were some of the earliest personalities at the station?
Well, the early group, and of course, they started from the Wilder building downtown, so they call them the Wilder Bunch. And they were a wild and zany bunch, and they pushed TV to its potential. And very creative bunch of people and very fun-loving. Of course, Alan Newcomb, the Atlantic weatherman, who had been a World War II bomber pilot. Jim Patterson, who signed on the station and, of course, was known as Uncle Jim on the Junior Rancho program with Fred Kirby. Betty Feaser in 1953 joined the station. Pat Lee, who had read the Sunday comics on the radio, was with the station. Lonis McGlowan, the musician, and of course Bob Rayford, who is on radio now, but he hosted Nocturne, which was a jazz television program in those early days. There was a lot of great TV.
That's for sure, and very much pioneering TV, since this obviously was the first one in the Carolinas and one of the very first television stations in the South. Let's hone in on a couple of the individuals you mentioned, some of the early women of WBTV. I guess Betty and Pat were the best known.
Well, Betty and Pat were the best known, perhaps, but Susie McIntyre was one of the early women on television and did the Carolina Cooking Show. Doris Hagler, who did a Man Around the House feature. I'm trying to think. Kathy Haynes, who did a shopping on TV feature. Of course, then Gail Harris, much later, joined the station, a very young anchor person. And, of course, then we have Sarah James and Sarah Van Allen with the station today. And of course, Barbara Stutz, now McKay.
Well, obviously, I'm highly biased, but we've had wonderful women working for us and tremendous ones. Now, I think, there we go. Here is Gil Stamper, whom a lot of people will remember from both radio and television.
Right, Gil was one of the early announcers. He was part of that group that was the Wilder bunch that was there in the first 5 years.
Gil was a tremendous guy. Now, it looks like we have the Cracker Jacks here.
Well, several musical groups in those early days that had transferred from radio to television. Arthur Smith and the Cracker Jacks, Cecil Campbell and the Tennessee Ramblers. And, of course, Cecil just recently passed away.
Yeah, well, what a tremendous amount of history. And here are some people that we will all recognize, Doug and Clyde.
Yes, of course, Clyde McLean, a weatherman who'd been on radio for years and then came to television and kind of was the voice of the weather in the Carolinas for many years. They never did let Clyde forget that he had miscast the Christmas 1947, I believe it was, weathercast. He said it wouldn't snow, there wouldn't be a white Christmas. The next morning there were 8 inches of snow on the ground.
He said it was going to be partly cloudy, and people said there were 8 inches of partly cloudy on the ground. That's when they started calling him Cloudy McLean, I think.
That's right.
Yeah. And, of course, Doug pictured there with him, and he was the dean of Carolina Newscasters.
Right. Doug started as the SO reporter and was with WBTV for many years, and then he finally left.
What a great guy he is, too. And here is a genuine legend, not only here in the Charlotte area, but all throughout the Southeast, and a man who actually migrated to Hollywood back in the 30s and made some movies out there, Fred Kirby.
Right, Fred Kirby and Calico, and as you said, they're well known throughout Western Carolina. Tweetsy Railroad, the Junior Rancho program, and, of course, Uncle Jim Patterson was with him on that program.
Okay. And Fred, thank goodness, is still alive and doing well and looking fantastic, as a matter of fact. No longer alive, but her legend sure persists, Betty Feeser.
Right, Betty Feeser, and as you mentioned, Betty Feeser and Pat Lee were probably two of the leading ladies with WBT, and they both passed away very close together. Pat at the end of 1977, and Betty passed away in February of '78, and was a loss of two wonderful women.
That's for sure. Two very talented people, too. And here, back to Clyde again. Clyde, of course, the original weatherman, not only in this part of the country, but really about the premier one in the South.
Well, that's right. Clyde was a great weatherman. Of course, I guess you learned most of your trade underneath him.
Working with him for an awful lot of years. What a tremendous man. And of course, well known, too, as the announcer for the Arthur Smith Show for a lot of years.
Right, that's right. Of course, Alan Newcomb, the Atlantic weatherman. Alan was a great fellow, died at a very early age, had been a World War II bomber pilot, and spent 8 months in a German POW camp.
And people still ask about Alan. Obviously, the memory's going to be there forever, but people still ask about, those years gone by, and he was a tremendous success here, too.
Oh, yes. Of course, Big Bill Ward, who was a sportscaster and also hosted the three-ring circus children's show, but the voice of the South and a voice of wrestling, Big Bill Ward.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because they used to tape the wrestling shows here at the station, and of course Big Bill was kind of the host of those. And here we have Art Linkletter and Ty Boyd.
Right, Ty Boyd. The one thing is the cooperation between radio and television. A number of those early personalities, of course, had to get their training on radio, but even today, WBTV still pulls talent from their radio station. I know you were on radio. Ty Boyd was on radio for a number of years.
When I first came to the station, which is now more than 22 years ago, the staffs were combined. You did everything, AM, FM, and TV at that time. Of course, we have separate staffs now, but it's a great interaction between the radio and TV sides.
Also been interaction with the newspaper. Bob Quincy came from the Charlotte Observer, and Jim Babb was with the Charlotte Observer.
I tell you, we've had some wonderful people here, and you're very wonderful for staying with us here on Channel 3. We hope you do. Hugh, thanks for joining us. It was a wonderful rundown of some of the great people here.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, good to see you. More Top of the Day yet to come. You stay with us.
What's in the future for WBTV? President Jim Babb looks to the next 40 years. Coming up.
Now, this is a view that you very rarely see. We're in back of the station right now, and these are our satellite dishes, and in front of that is News Star. News Star enables us to go anywhere in the country and send you back pictures and the story, wherever it happens to be breaking, whether it's Seattle, Washington, or Statesville. The two dishes that you see behind News Star allow us to pull satellite transmissions from anywhere within the country, and indeed the world, and also to send them out. Now, that we all day long we've been remembering and talking about the past. We're going to kind of talk a little bit about the future now. I'm standing here with James G. Babb. Jim, as we affectionately know him. He is the president of Jefferson Pilot Communications. Jim, we have been looking back at the past, and we've really, I think it's sometimes we forget that we are a very young industry. Television is really only about 40 years old.
That is true. It certainly is 40 years old in the Carolinas. As an industry, it's only 50 years old, so we're still just in mid-age, so to speak. It was a fun look, looking back over the past 40 years, though. Triggered off a lot of fond memories.
It does make us wonder, though, where we are going to go. If we have made such enormous advances in the short time that this invention has been on the air, where are the next 40 years likely to take us?
Well, I'm very excited and enthusiastic about the future, Lynn. I think that the golden age is still in front of us, as a matter of fact. Just in this decade, we've added these satellite dishes and the uplink truck, satellite news gathering truck that we have. And I think what we're going to see, the two major things that will impact our viewers at home, will be the further miniaturization of sets. We'll probably see in the early part of the 90s wrist watch television.
Kind of like Dick Tracy?
Kind of Dick Tracy, very exactly Dick Tracy. And I think we'll see that in the early part of the 90s. The most important overall technological advancement as far as home viewing is concerned will be in the form of what we call high-definition television, HDTV, or ACT, Advanced Television. And to give a simple comparison, I would say the beauty of the pictures that you see on your home television set in color today would be compared to when we first went on the air 40 years ago in black and fuzzy black and white. The next advance in the mid-90s will be that great an advance. I mean, if you think they're at least 100% better now than they were in 1949, I do. I think by 1995, the television viewer will see pictures on their home set that will be at least 100% better than what we see now in full color with greater definition and very exciting potential and the things that we'll be able to do with that.
Well, speaking as a reporter, I look forward to that. You always see us out here at noon and we have these long, dark shadows on our faces. Will HDTV eliminate that sort of thing?
Well, no, it'll emphasize it, as a matter of fact. No, it'll give a very true picture of what's actually there and the fidelity that we'll see will be beyond description. And now, Top of the Day and PM Magazine take trips all over the world of being beautiful sights back into the homes of the Carolinians. What we will be seeing in the mid-90s will be spectacular. Because of the satellites and the miniaturization of cameras and the rest of the equipment, virtually any spot in the world is now accessible to us and therefore to our viewers. And I think you all have done a beautiful job of bringing the world into the homes. So what it will do is be able to bring it in with greater definition, more clarity, and just more real life than we can even do it now.
Do you think television and perhaps, like, let's say, the phone companies will join forces using phone lines? Will we one day, through our television set, be able to send in a script to the office, pay our bills, and also check and find out what's going on in China?
No doubt, no doubt. There'll be a full spectrum of consumer needs being met through the television and through cable. Interestingly, though, I think the thing that we're so enthusiastic about free, universal, over-the-air television. I mean, it is free. All you need is a television set and an antenna, and you can get the world brought to your living room or to your bedroom or to your bathroom or kitchen, wherever. And we're very excited about that because now, even with cable, over 80% of the viewing is done to stations like WBTV and everything.
Thank you so much for talking with us about the future. Of course, Jim is going to be the guy that is going to lead WBTV into the future, and I think the company's in pretty good hands.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you, and hope you will stay with us for the next few minutes. We have more Top of the Day. We're going to look back and look ahead. Stay with us.
WBTV fondly remembers old friends and new.
All right, boys and girls, come on now. Let's sing our song. How we love the little rascals, little rascals, little rascals. How we love the little
And look at the beautiful cake that celebrates our birthday. It was made by Kathy Goggin from Happy Cakes. If you want more information about cakes like this, you can call us and we'll give you the number. But isn't that a beautiful cake commemorating this very special day?
You know, as a matter of fact, the station management has been very nice on this day to us. We have little watches we've been given with those little
here,
designs on them.
Watch.
Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, we're just sort of showing off these things to each other. It has been a great time for us here, and especially it has been wonderful to look back on some people like Clyde McLean, Jim Patterson, Betty Feeser, Pat Lee, Alan Newcomb, those originals who made this place what it is and gave us such big footsteps to follow in.
They sure did, and I tell you what, I think we are very adequately following them. I don't mean the four of us standing here, but all the people that bring you WBTV and Top of the Day and our newscasts every single day. All of our ENG people, our production staff, our directors, our company president walking in right now. We could not do what we do without them. And we're in here in front of everything, and you see us, but these are the people that make things happen.
But you're right. But the thing we can't do without is the people at home. Here is a look. We leave you today with a look at some of the crazy things we used to do to get you to watch WBTV.
Bye-bye.
Hey, watch 3. Stay with 3. Hey, watch 3. You see that there's so many ways.
Coming up next on WBTV News, a bizarre development in the story of that unconscious pilot who crashed in the ocean.
100 people are evacuated in Watauga County after a hazardous chemical spill.
Coming up in sports, the Heat falls last night and the Hornets hire a new strength coach.
Those stories, plus WBTV celebrates its 40th birthday. Join us.
The newscast judged best in North Carolina by the Associated Press. From WBTV Charlotte, Bob Inman, Sarah James, Paul Cameron, and the area's most experienced weathercaster, Mike McKay. The team that's on your side. This is WBTV News.
Good evening. Two new strange developments in the story of the wandering plane, the Cessna 210, that aimlessly flew along the Atlantic coast for 5 hours yesterday. The plane eventually crashed in the ocean near the Bahamas. The pilot, Thomas Root, is in a Florida hospital. He had been en route to Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Now investigators say Root had been shot at close range. They don't know if it was a suicide attempt. Also, word that the company Root works for is the target of a state of North Carolina investigation into securities fraud.
And especially in North Carolina. So while he is not the person only under investigation, quite obviously, his activities are under investigation, yes.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Well, earlier this week, we would love to have gotten on a plane and flown anywhere in the world, Frankfurt, Anchorage, Alaska, but right now, it's just Charlotte. The weather's so great out there.
It was gorgeous today. What a change.
Sure was. Mike McKay is at our birthday party, out at our picnic on the WBTV grounds. Mike, it's got to be gorgeous out there.
It sure is, Bob. No doubt about it. A lot of people having fun already. This is the birthday party for the WBTV staff and family, and there's going to be a carnival and picnic going on well into the hours of the evening. It's a great time so far, and boy, did we luck out in terms of weather. The coolness came as anticipated. The lower humidity came, which is, if anything, even more important. And as we head into the weekend, things are going to get even better. 88 was the high today, predicting about 84 for the next 2 days, and with that, even lower humidity. If you want to get out this weekend, it looks really, really good in that regard. Here's what's happening in our city at this time. We have 88 degrees. The humidity, look at that, only about 35%. Barometer 29.92. It's steady at that point. And the wind doesn't really amount to much. We have it from the south, only about 5 miles an hour right now. Now, I've already kind of tipped off what's going to be happening for the weekend. As you can tell, the good folks here are having a good time. If you have outdoor activities planned for your weekend, you should have a good time too. I'll have details later.
All right, thanks very much, Mike. Well, still to come on WBTV News. WBTV has been around for only 40 years, but during that time, we've experienced a number of events we'll never forget.
More on the times when television has brought us together as global viewers, up next.
Harry Golden makes his home and his office in this 9-room frame house on Elizabeth Avenue in Charlotte. Evening, Harry.
Good evening, Ed. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Are you sampling some of that balmy North Carolina weather?
Well, it hasn't been balmy tonight. We've had a little rain, but it stopped the minute we got on the air.
In 1949, WBTV's first regularly scheduled program was called Telenews, and it consisted of an announcer reading news items out of the newspaper. Well, needless to say, things have changed a lot since then. Sarah joins us now from our newsroom, where the business of TV news continues to evolve. Sarah?
Well, you know, Bob, just a few years ago and 40 years ago, certainly there were no computers, no live trucks, no satellites, and no helicopters. But there's one part of the business that's remained the same, and that is, of course, people power. Now, you all are familiar with a lot of the people here at WBTV. You're familiar with the anchors and the reporters and the photographers, the folks you see covering the news. But then there are the people behind the scenes, like Frank here, who is one of our engineers and who is going to help us see the story that you are about to see. The television industry has changed, and over the years we've gotten to see some pretty powerful, some incredible stories and images brought to us in a way that radio and newspapers never could. Now Lori Thomas looks back on some of the events that we will never forget.
A bulletin from CBS News. President Kennedy has been shot by a would-be assassin in Dallas, Texas.
This is the story that brought it home. With the assassination of President Kennedy, that box in the living room became America's lifeline to history.
The weekend that John Kennedy was assassinated, my father went out and rented a television because he felt like this was something that my family should see. He said, this is history and we need to watch it happening. And we were glued to the set for the entire weekend.
But once the world walked into her living room, McGinnis says she lost a little of her naivete about life. Maybe we all did.
If you know the president, that was probably a facetious remark.
Television not only lost Richard Nixon a big debate in his political career, it also documented the end of it, his resignation after Watergate.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
TV's powerful images pull us right into both triumph and tragedy, from man's glorious steps on the moon to the horrible worst with the Space Shuttle Challenger. Vietnam was the first war that went home with us, graphic human tragedy at dinner time every night.
There's been much written about the fact that when people really saw the war and really saw what it was all about in terms of the human destruction, that helped to bring an end to the war.
Walk the streets day in and day out.
Over the years, TV's brought home many beginnings and endings, from the inspiration and assassination of Martin Luther King to the rise and fall of Jim and Tammy Baker.
Certainly all communication mediums, whether they're electronic or plays or books or whatever, they can move us and they can make us learn. But television brings real events to life in a way that nothing else really can.
Lori Thomas, WBTV News, Charlotte.
When there is breaking news in Charlotte or around the world and you need to know, we bring it to you from right here at this news break desk right in the center of our newsroom, and that's where we bring you breaking news. But of course, most of the news we bring to you every evening from the studio, and that's where, of course, Bob is.
Some powerful images there, Sarah. Thank you and Lori for bringing that to us. When we come back in a moment, we'll find out why more tornadoes touch down in the Carolinas than any other part of the country. Are we becoming the new Tornado Alley? Find out in the final part of our special report.
Hi, everybody. This is Paul Cameron. Coming up in sports, Conseco is back in Oakland with a vengeance. Details on all the sports in just a few minutes.
Mike McKay is here tonight, sitting in for Jim Thacker, who's out of town with the sports. Mike?
Right, and Jim is busy with the ACC's yearly meeting, a big one, and he'll be back tomorrow, I think. To lead off with in sports, we've got one of the saddest and one of the longest running sports stories ever, and we'll have that in just a minute.
The U.S. Supreme Court today upheld a pupil assignment plan for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, originally ordered into effect last fall by District Judge James McMillan. Today's ruling says, in effect, that busing and school pairing are acceptable means of eliminating racially identifiable schools.
If you're going to go to the coast, unfortunately down there, may have that front hanging around causing you some complications and the possibility of maybe some scattered thunder showers both tomorrow and Sunday. But in general, whatever you got planned for the weekend in most parts of the Carolinas, the weather should be an ally and not an enemy. And that is sure nice to be able to say, Sarah.
It is good news. And it's nice to be out here with all the families who are part of the WBTV family, as indeed so are you. You know, when WBTV first went on the air in 1949, there were very few families who even had a television set so that they would be able to watch that. But by the 1950s, average TV households watched for an average of 5 hours a day. By the 70s, that had increased to 6 hours. And in the 1980s, we are watching an average of 7 hours of television a day. Well, what effect is that having on the family? You know, with the advent of cable and home videos and also video games, the days of the single-family television set are numbered. Your family reporter Maura Quinn tells us more about it.
Mr. Mills, how many television sets do you have in your house?
I have 3.
Why do you have so many?
Like watching TV, I guess.
How many television sets do you have in your house now?
Presently 2.
For how many people?
For just me.
I have 9.
Why do you have so many?
Well, I have that many rooms.
Families are watching separately now. The early patterns in the 50s were to watch together. In
Dr.
fact,
Ed Palmer is the head of the psychology department at Davidson College and has written a book about the way television affects kids. He's been watching the way we watch TV for years.
The early patterns in the 50s were to watch together. In fact, one of the primary reasons for getting a television set was the family gathering around it for popular programs that they all wanted to see.
Today, it's a different story.
My wife doesn't particularly like the same programs I do, so I have to get off by myself.
People, you know, have their own shows that they would like to watch, and maybe it doesn't agree with somebody else, so you go and watch your own thing on television.
A couple things happen there. There isn't the interaction potential related to it. If you're thinking about children, you don't have really the monitoring capabilities that you otherwise would have because they have the ready access to the set there.
Dr. Palmer says this splintered watching really is an opportunity missed, especially when it comes to our kids.
One of the values in television experience within families would be the sharing that happens, particularly with children. Let's say a child is watching a program with an adult. We know from the research and a lot of the literature that makes a major difference in the impact that a program has on a child.
This is Maura Quinn reporting on Your Family.
Maura told us that of the people that she interviewed for this story, every single one of them had more television sets than they had members of the family. And you might think that that would mean that since people are buying more and more sets, they are buying smaller and smaller ones. The opposite is true. Bob, people seem to be going to larger and larger television sets.
And I understand the new technology that'll be coming along in a few years, Sarah, our entire den wall will be just one big television set.
HDTV will make that possible, and it'll be clear as a bell.
That's right. Okay, thank you, Sarah. Hard to imagine, Paul Cameron, any area that's been affected more by television than yours, sports.
Especially when Mike McKay does sports on that one day.
That's right. Wasn't that something?
We got to get him to explain that tonight at 11 o'clock.
I thought he was pretty good.
He did. Yeah, let's start moving over here real quick. Well, coming up in sports tonight, we've got the Charlotte Heat, who lost last night, but coming up tonight, they got a chance to redeem themselves. That and all the sports and more.
Right here on the Betty Feeser Show.
Hello. On this very cold and getting much colder Wednesday visit, let's talk about whether you should wash your face or whether you should cream your face. I don't know the answer, but I can give you points on both sides.
Next up on our special edition of WBTV News, we'll take a look at 40 years of WBTV history through the eyes of some special people, you the viewers. Stay tuned.
Boys and girls, come on now, let's sing our song. How we love the little rascals, little rascals, little rascals. How we love the little rascals, little rascals are they.
When you get up in the morning and turn on your TV to Channel 3, WBTV, you'll be continuing a tradition that began 4 decades ago. WBTV became the Carolina's first television station, only the 13th in the whole nation, when it signed on the air July the 15th, 1949. Tonight, John Carter takes us on a look back.
There are 6 television stations in Charlotte today, so sometimes it's hard to imagine that not really too long ago there were no television stations here or in the Carolinas. Back in the late 1940s, there were only 12 television stations nationwide, so a lot of folks around here had only heard of TV.
Folks like Ed and Rosalie Keever, who'd been married just a few years at the time.
You just couldn't hardly believe it. You know, it was just about impossible to, like she says, to send stuff through the air and pick it up anywhere you wanted to.
But things were about to happen that would forever change Charlotte and the Carolinas.
This is the studio of WBT Radio, and you might say this is where WBTV was born. Back in December of 1947, the folks at Jefferson Standard Broadcasting, the company which owned WBT Radio, applied to the Federal Communications Commission for a television station, a telestation, some folks back then called it. 2 months later, in February of 1948, a license was granted. TV was coming to Charlotte.
We've heard about all, you know, the big cities having all this, and I thought it was that we were just getting up in the world.
A transmitting tower was built on Spencer Mountain in Gaston County. Studios were built in the Wilder Building in downtown Charlotte. Finally, at noon on July 15th, 1949, history was made.
Good afternoon. This is Jim Patterson welcoming you to Channel 3 Television from WBTV, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Jim Patterson was Charlotte's first real TV personality, hired specifically for the news station, while other personalities crossed over from WBT Radio. Among them, a wiry young fellow named Clyde McLean.
And he never really thought he'd have much of a participatory role in television. He thought television was for the pretty boys.
But Clyde became, and remained until his death, the Carolinas' most recognized television personality. Others, too, became as familiar to viewers as their own families.
My name is Betty Feaser, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Betty Feaser Show, if I may. This program has been on.
We loved Betty Feaser, laughed along with Pat Lee and Alan Newcomb, while we sang along with Fred Kirby, chuckled with Big Bill Ward. So many faces, so many friends through the years. Telenews was the first program aired on WBTV. Since that time, there have been so many others produced here.
Championship Wrestling, Channel 3's Saturday sports presentation.
Yes, indeed, it's the Arthur Smith Show with all the Cracker Jacks, brought to you by...
Good morning, and welcome to This Morning.
Things have changed over the years. WBTV moved its studios. Some personalities have passed away or moved on elsewhere. But one thing remains constant at WBTV, a commitment to excellence. A commitment first echoed by Jim Patterson 40 years ago.
Here begins a new mode of living, bringing your family, even the peoples of the world, closer together. Television is your invitation to knowledge, to enjoyment of life. And so for us and for you, this occasion, a milestone in television in this area, is indeed a memorable occasion.
I'm John Carter, WBTV News.
One of the things that amazes us here at WBTV is the kindness and the talent of many of our viewers. This is from Myra Philpott's Goforth of Hickory, a 40-pound cake she baked yesterday, put 15 pounds of icing. It took her 5 hours to decorate it today. Woo! Thank you, Myra of Myra Cake Cut-Ups in Hickory.
That is incredible. While you and Paul cut the cake, I want to appoint Mike as our senior citizen. A young guy like you can't be a senior citizen, but you came here in 1967, Mike. That's right. And among the four of us, you're the senior on the air. Yeah. Reflect just briefly on the 40 years or the 20 years that you've been here at the station.
Well, it's now been 22, and I'll tell you, I think this cake is a wonderful symbol of what is the most important thing of all, and that is those of you who watch. That's been the one constant all the way through that's been so consistent. Your warmth, your generosity, your kindness to us who are parts of WBTV, and I know all four of us feel very lucky to be carrying on the tradition that is a very rich one, and very lucky to be able to continue to serve and be here for you.
We really feel like we work for you, and we hope you'll continue to let us work for you over the next 40 years. Thanks for coming to our birthday party, and have a great weekend. Good night.
Send more cakes.
Let's cut the cake.
All right.
It's beautiful.
It started with this announcement.
This is WBTV, Charlotte, North Carolina. Signing on, channel. This is the first television broadcasting signal in the two Carolinas.
And a tradition of service to the Carolinas had begun.
On your side.
WBTV has been on your side for 40 years, improving life in our community. We've helped boys who need a home. Our blood give-ins keep blood banks stocked, and that saves lives. And our Children's Miracle Telethon gives money for life-saving technology at a local hospital.
$256.
Right. And on your side with Charlotte's favorite news team.
On your side.
Your neighborhood, your family, your money, and your health. For 40 years, we've cared about you.
WBTV, on your side.